As somebody who has been appointed to coordinate government affairs, I had a discussion with His Excellency and colleagues and said we should have a cabinet retreat. But it will not be like the old types of retreat. This is going to be a different retreat. A retreat that will discuss the pressing priority development imperatives of this country and come up with an implementable action plan that has timelines, people who would deliver and give results with a monitoring dashboard. As we implement, we self-assess and see how far we are going, what progress has been made, what are the implementation constraints, and what is the panacea to those implementation constraints. The Gambian people have great expectations. And it reminds me of two writers. Charles Dickens wrote Great Expectations. Chinua Achebe wrote No Longer at Ease. The Gambian people have great expectations, and they are no longer at ease. To make them at ease, we have to deliver the development agenda of this government, our government. And in so doing, we identified 10 priority areas. They are not exhaustive, but there are priorities within priorities. Came up with the civil service reform, hence the appointment of a minister for the civil service. The civil service is the engine of ideas, the engine of programs, the engine of projects, but also the implementers of those projects, programs, and ideas. To have an effective and efficient civil service, we have to have an intermodal focus of the civil service, do an assessment of the civil service, do a profiling of the civil service, have a baseline, set benchmarks, design a performance contract, which will include, among other things, training, and the training could be spaced or phased in 3. There's the pre-service training, there's the long-term and the medium-term training, and there is the in-service training to bring people up to speed, because skills and knowledge, they're evolving, they're dynamic, they're not static. What was required in the 60s and the 70s is not what is required today in terms of skills and knowledge application. In the 60s and the 70s, it was trendy to study political science and international relations because that was the fight for independence. And there was a paradigm shift in the 80s and 90s because we wanted economic independence. That was the time we talked about structural adjustment, the program for sustainable development, the CCAL and others. Today, in the 20s, we are talking about the digital knowledge, e-health, e-education, e-agriculture, e-everything. So there's a knowledge shift, there's a skill shift. So we have to look at that. How do we retool, recalibrate, and re-engineer the civil service to be more responsive and receptive that ministers to the realization and actualization of the goals of the NDP and our development imperatives? The Minister for the Civil Service has a big task, but we will be working together with the Secretary General, with the Personal Management Office, and the PSC to make these things happen. It cannot be business as usual in the civil service. We go to security. We would have to mobilize resources for them to be more effective. We don't have to take security for granted. In security, you never say it cannot happen or it will not happen. It happens when you least expect it to happen, because that's the time they strike. They catch you unawares. We will have to make the police, the drug squad, the military more effective, more efficient, but more importantly, more professional. That is important, so that you earn the respect of the people. It is unacceptable for an officer to see you on the road, stop you, and tell you, we don't have attire. It is unacceptable for an officer to tell you Silobula and say Dasa Modena. Those things are unacceptable for a uniformed person. I think that kind of discipline, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Interior, and their heads of, the heads of the security should look at that. The SIS also should be more proactive. Preventive security is more important than offensive security. If you have solid intelligence, then you can preempt whatever the plan was. An effective, invisible SIS will be more effective. But not people who tell you, don't you know that I'm SIS? Or I'm NIA. You've blown your cover. What can you gather? Those are some of the things that we will have to include in the curriculum of reorientation and the retraining and the retooling, and the in-servicing of this security apparatus. We thank them for the job that they have done. There is more to do, and we are grateful. We appreciate that. All we are saying is just be more professional, and we will help you to extend your professionalism and your professionality so that you can be more effective in protecting the lives, property, and the sovereign integrity of this country. We go to the cost of living. The Honorable Ministers of Finance, Trade, the Central Bank, the Chamber of Commerce, the business community, the Ports Authority have to put on some thinking caps and see how best we can address this issue. It's not easy. We are already in a very difficult situation, and it is impacting on the health and well-being of people. If the cost of living goes through the roof, it could break marriages, it could create animosity in the family, because people will begin having 1 meal a day instead of 3 meals a day. And then people become agitated, emotional. because there's nothing in the pocket, and you ask for something, then they're irritated. It leads to chaos and crisis. So, Mr. Minister, honorable ministers, let's look at this in extenso and apply strategic thinking to break up. And some of them are caused by the cartels. It's artificial. We have to be honest and be frank and be brave enough to take them on. I know that when it is business, it's profit-driven, but it should not be at the expense of the majority of the lives of the Gambian people. Empower some people. Give them all the initiatives. Open up rolling LCs so that essential commodities like rice, sugar, oil, flour, and others can be brought in and dump in the market, depress prices, bring them to the level of affordability so that Gambian people can survive. We've seen it happen, in some countries. It works. You have to just be innovative and strategic about it. We cannot just pay lip service to it and allow it to happen. Think of the messengers, the drivers, the poor farmers, and we are going into the lean season. The rains are coming. They have not harvested anything. Think of single mothers or single parents. Think of the unemployed youths. That should prick the moral conscience of us policymakers and policy drivers to come up with strategies that would bring affordable prices so that people can live in peace rather than in pieces. And that brings me to employment. And it's cross-cutting. There's the Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Education, the two ministries of education, all of us, the whole government, our government. The Gambia has a very high rural-urban migration. It has a very high Gambia to Europe migration. The Europe of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, or up to the 80s, is no longer the Europe of now. It was easy then, and you could make it. But today, you could mistake in Europe, as the goal. But it's the glitter rather than the goal for us today. Hence, the barbed wires and the walls and the repatriations and so on. And that relates to my point. And I would link the two thematic areas, migration and employment. The question is, why do they leave? There's a push factor. They come to the urban area from the rural areas because of the Coca-Cola neon light attractions of the cities, the metropole. And they think it is all life. And you see them teeming around the Senegambia area, the red light district. That is not life. We should revisit our education policies, our employment policies, to make sure that they are gainfully employed, whether it is in tourism, whether it's in the fisheries industry, whether it is in professional vocations like teaching or the security forces or wherever. We should make it possible. All small enterprises and entrepreneurial citizenry that is enterprising in mindset, enterprising in effort, enterprising in skills that minister to their level of employability, a gainful employment that would have a redounding effect positively on the families. The most important thing somebody has in life is his or her life. But if you act out your life in the desert sands of the Sahara, only perhaps not to reach the shores of the Mediterranean and die, or get enslaved and tortured in some Mediterranean country or countries, or drown in the treacherous waters of the Mediterranean. And even if you are lucky and you cross to Europe, you are told you are not wanted because you are put in some tent, some camp, you are barbed wired or walled out. You find yourself in the freezing cold, and you get up in the morning and you find your fireplace cold. That is a serious issue. We have to look at that and readdress that. It also has a negative impact on the country, because your tomorrow, that is the youth, the labor force, the effective and efficient and competent labor force is migrating. There's labor migration. So who stays back? The retired, the old, and the feeble. Those people cannot move this country tomorrow. So you've mortgaged your future. So we have to address those issues. Concrete action plans that we need to do to be able to make sure that at least, we can have them gainfully employed. They employ themselves, or they are employed by the public sector, or they are employed by the private sector. It can only happen if they have the relevant and requisite skills that those industries or the private sector needs or the public sector needs, or they themselves can use to be able to, carve out a living for themselves. Mr. Chairman, there is also the land issue. If you look at the size of this country, I don't think we are more than 11,000 square miles. We have that landmass. Part of it is occupied by water. Part of it by our forests. We need land for shelter. If we commercialize this land, our families, the future generation, where would they live? Especially when you give it to foreign private estate developers who make millions, repatriate the money, then there's capital flight. And then we are denuded of land for our families. No, that is wrong. And I would encourage the minister to impose at least an embargo for the next 2 to 3 years on foreign estate land development. Reassess the land policy, and see how we can give at least 90 to 95% of the land to Gambians for homes, for shelter. It's a human right, But also we need land banking for tourism. We need land banking for agriculture. We need land banking for fish farming. We need those things. We are not like a big country like some of our neighbors. So this land, which is finite, we must manage judiciously. The other aspect of the land that we need to look at, Honorable Minister, is protect the minority who historically had access to a particular land. It is the duty of government to protect minority rights. We should protect them to avoid some crisis and instability. Some of them are raw facts, and there are no lavender words for the truth. Oscar Wilde says, it is a moral obligation to say the truth, and when you say it, it becomes a pleasure. I derive pleasure in telling people the truth, no matter what. That's why we said, so help me God. Education. We are on the reform process. I'm a derivative of the education sector, and I'm sure my predecessor, together with his counterpart in basic education, which is the feeder ministry, will continue the reform of the GTTI into the University of Applied Science, Engineering, and Technology. It's already on. They are on their second year doing their BSc in the engineering departments. By the University of Kwame Nkrumah and also the University of Demon Fort. And MDI, which is GPAM now, Gambia Institute of Public Administration and Management, partnering with Subdeco and MD and JIMPA in Ghana, offering degrees that is on up to master's level. The Gambia College, the policy would be broken up into 3. The School of Agriculture will go into the University of the Gambia. The School of Nursing and Public Health will go into the Gambia. And the biggest school, which is the School of Education, will stand alone, and we will have a teacher university education. And come September, we are phasing out what used to be called the PTC, Primary Teacher Certificate, or now diploma, and elevating it to the level of the ATC or the advanced diploma. The quality of education is as good as the quality of its teachers. If the teachers are poorly educated, obviously you have the students will be poorly educated. And it has a contagion factor on the society. Poor engineers, poor doctors, poor economics, poor lawyers, poor nurses, everything poor. And obviously you end up having cumulatively, in aggregate terms, poor society. Education has to get it right. It is at the front, it is at the forefront of development. You cannot run quality education on serendipity. It has to be well designed. Emphasis put on access, yes, but more importantly, on quality. And it starts from early childhood, coming all the way to lower basic, upper basic, secondary, to tertiary education. And I have no doubt that the 2 ministers, who, by the way, education is their respective competencies, will make sure that we achieve quality education for our kids. That is important for us. We should be able to identify what is best for us. John Dewey says, in the multitude of educations, education is lost. It is that lost education that you should find and bring it back, which is qualitative, relevant, appropriate, and ministers to employment, gainful employment. Foreign policy. I'm not sure we have a foreign policy. If we do, it's dormant. So we need to make sure that we have an effective, well-signposted foreign policy. A foreign policy that has differential targets, a foreign policy that has differential strategic partnership, a foreign policy that goes for a positive sum game, a win-win situation, because that's what it is all about. You partner with somebody so that at least it can help in your self-development and self-actualization. What is our foreign policy with Senegal? What is our foreign policy with ECOWAS? What is our foreign policy with China or America or the EU? Those are things that we need to really think of. And it cannot be one. It's not one size fits all. No. Our foreign policy with Senegal cannot be like our foreign policy with China. Foreign policy is not just traveling, attending meetings, and then you come back, you say, oh, it went very well. Hell no. It's much more than that. It is something that brings something into this country. It's this trigger that sets everything else rolling. You are the face of the nation. You are selling this country to other countries. Let's partner. Help us in agriculture. It's a win-win situation. Help us in education, in health. Bring investment into this country. Meaningful investment. Not an investment that would exploit or destroy this country. We want to see a sound, effective foreign policy that has strategic targets and to the benefit of the Gambia and the Gambian people. Tourism. The minister heading the tourism industry is a doyen in that area. But I would want the minister to look at the sector. Is it the right way to go, all-inclusive? Do we need tourists who would just come here, buy a bottle of water, and keep refilling it from one dispenser to another until they go home? Or who sits in some nearby restaurant and buys food? High-spending tourists is what we are interested in. Look at also the sun and the sand and the sea is becoming a monotony. When it is summertime in Europe, you spend the sun and the sand in the sea in Spain or Portugal or somewhere in the Mediterranean. Let's go for ecotourism, perhaps. Let's go for river tourism. Let's look at something that is strategic. And the products that you find in the tourist market, if you come once, you buy once, twice, the third time you don't know how to buy anything because it's the same old thing. I think the Hospitality Institute, you broaden the curriculum, Mr. Minister. Let's look at Senegal, look at Indonesia. How do we diversify the tourist products in terms of what they would be buying? Perhaps using local material or be creative about it. Since the days of Vingresso, it's the same thing. It becomes monotonous. It has to be attractive. It has to, we should not be trapped in reactive logic. It should be proactive logic to get it right. This is aggregately, cumulatively, that develops our country. We get education right, tourism right, land right, migration right, employment right, security right, cost of living right, civil service reform right, then we get it right for our development. In the 70s and the 60s, the Arab world was desert. The days of King Faisal and Sheikh Yamani. And the main means of especially internal travel, was the camel. The development curve in that area between the camel and the Lexus, the BMs and the Benzes was very short. They got it right. That's why everybody today wants to go to Dubai. You want to go to Jeddah. You want to go to Oman. You want to go to Qatar. China in the days of Chairman Mao in the 70s. Chu Enlai in the 70s. And China today of Xi Jinping. It's like cheese and chop. They got it right. Because when Deng Xiaoping took over and visited the Asian tigers, he realized that China had to reform. It cannot be the China of those yesteryears. It was the frugal, tough-mindedness of those Asian tigers, together with their Spartan character, and of course being in the borderline of the Cold War. They got it right. And we also need to get it right. And we can only get it right if we change our attitude, if we change our mindset, if we change our politics. Politics is just having really the same agenda, but different ways of achieving it. There's no political party in this country which does not want youth to be employed. It's the same agenda. There's no political party which does not want access to good health care. There's no political party which says that my agenda is not qualitative education or, tourism, at its best, or land reform, or whatever you want. We all have the same agenda. It's just different ways of getting it. All roads lead to Rome. It's just different ways of doing it. So there's no need for acrimony. There's no need for insults. When people are voted in, you put aside the politics. You bring development, cooperation, partnership, and we move on. When it is time for politics, we go back to the Gambian people. And they decide who they want. And you do it. But if we spend most of the time in acrimonious politics, it retires us. It takes us back. And this is a very small country. We are all related by marriage, by religion, by education, by ethnicity, by regions. My mom is Fula. My dad is Serer. My wife is Mandinka. So, where do I belong? And I'm sure I'm not the only one, many people. So let's put that aside. Let's see the Gambia first. States go beyond individuals. Gandhi says when the interest of the state conflicts with the interest of the individual, the interest of the state prevails. So I think that is important for us. We protect the state, just as we protect our environment. That is important for us. The environment here is, I'm using it as a portmanteau term, not as a sectorial term, Honorable Minister. As a portmanteau term, the environment it deals with the land, it deals with the waters, it deals with the forests, it deals with the people. That is important. But there's a peculiar thing, particular issue that I want to address when it comes to the Minister of the Environment. And it is this business of deforestation and also these logs, this timber issue. And this is where the security comes in. It showed us the intelligent mind to see, to understand how trucks of timber can leave LRR pass all those security checkpoints, over 15, 20 of them, and read the ports. And you have security at the ports. You have inspection at the ports. I don't know, you have Adikuda plus, I don't know, whatever, at the ports. And they are shipped out. Something is fundamentally wrong with that. And the security have to fix it. The security, they have to fix it. Ports have to fix it, or they are answerable to government. We have to take our responsibility. It is not a light responsibility. This government wants to get it right for the next 5 years. You cannot make omelette without breaking eggs. I will talk the truth. You want, let the president get me out. But I'll say it. And I say it as it is, and I've been saying as it is in the cabinet. That's the only way we can get it right. My dad used to tell me, Fudega amul rek dego du am. So nañ wax dega bi, and we talk about it, we make sure that we implement what is right. It is right to do what is right, to get it right. And we have to get it right by doing what is right. Thank you very much.